climb the corporate ladder. Stay with one company your entire career. Loyalty, right? Take the promotion, even though it's not exactly what you want. Who cares? This is the type of advice that I have been hearing since I was young, and it doesn't apply to most professionals today. The idea of the corporate ladder, especially, is still being talked about. So the second that you consider a lateral move instead of moving up, people start questioning it. And then you start asking yourself, am I falling behind? Will this hurt my resume? What will people think of me if my title stays the same? But some of the smartest career moves that people make are lateral moves because the value is not always in the title change. Sometimes the real value comes from gaining exposure to different parts of the business, building relationships outside your normal circle of professionals, or developing transferable skills that become much more useful later in your career. At the same time, nonlinear paths can create confusion if you can't clearly explain how the pieces fit together. And not every hiring manager is going to immediately understand the value of those moves. So today we're going to talk about how to evaluate lateral opportunities more strategically and how to think about these options in a way that's going to expand your long-term career leverage. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad that you're here. This season is all about career leverage, how your career evolves once credibility is established and you're ready to be strategic. In the last episode, we talked about sponsorship and access to different opportunities, specifically within your organization. Now today, we're going to be looking at lateral career moves and why some of those moves are going to strengthen your long-term leverage and others might create some confusion or possibly even narrow some of those options for the future. So let's get into it. Why do professionals resist lateral career moves? I can't even tell you how many people resist this option when they meet with me. I think that so many professionals are taught to think about careers as always moving up, always going for the next thing. So taking a lateral move sometimes can be very uncomfortable. And for some people, it might feel like a high risk. And I will say there is a trend right now where I've seen a few people talk about going down the ladder. And there are some benefits to that, but there are also some risks to that as well. I think sometimes it's easier to talk about promotions. So when you're, out with people, talking with friends or family, it's easier to talk about the promotion that you got than the lateral move. You feel like you have to really explain that. Sometimes lateral moves can just feel confusing. And I think that happens more in terms of our emotions about it than the actual move itself. The actual move itself is probably fine, but the emotions around it can be very confusing and we don't really know what to do about that. People start to worry about how they're going to be perceived, specifically if they're going to look like somebody who is staying stagnant in their career, or possibly they might come across as unfocused. It would only be unfocused if the position was just wildly different, but even then, if it's strategic, it's fine. I think a lot of organizations will reward any kind of specialization early. And so when that happens, we feel like we have to stay on that path and move up within that path. So anytime that we deviate from the path, that can feel really hard to manage, right? And then sometimes professionals will stay in a very narrow path for way too long because they think that that's what people want to see. And they think that it's the safe choice, even if it's not the best choice for them. So these are some of the common reasons that people really resist lateral moves. Some of the examples that I've seen with clients and just people in my circle is somebody will turn down a lateral move to another team because it doesn't come with a different title, like a title that is higher. So it's a new experience that's going to give them a new skill set, but they're not getting a higher title, so they don't want to take the position. Um, I think sometimes where I see this like hold people back the most is you stay in a really narrow specialty for a really long time, like years and years. And then when you want to get into management and leadership roles, there's a gap. There's a huge gap there, either because you haven't worked with enough people, you haven't really had any kind of informal management experience, or you seemingly do not understand the organization or the industry broadly because you've been in such a narrow focus, right? So when you are looking at different career moves, I want you to think about your own feelings toward lateral moves. Some of you aren't going to care, but some of you are going to be like, oh no, I would never take a position that wasn't a step up. Well, eventually you're going to plateau. So that's a different conversation. But I want you to think back to different positions and different moves that you have made within your career. And how are you evaluating those moves? Because if it's purely based on the visible progression, it might be holding you back in some instances. So I want you to really think about that. So lateral moves, I think, can be such a benefit. They can strengthen your positioning in the future because it's going to expand your understanding, your relationships, and your scope, depending on what it is, right? So, especially if you're moving from one team to another, that cross-functional exposure is going to build such amazing business awareness. And we talked about that a few episodes back, that business awareness was one of those top 5 skills that we need in order to move ahead in our career. And anytime you can take a lateral move that gives you exposure that makes sense for you, that's something you want to consider, especially if it's cross-functional. Different environments are going to expand your perspective. So lateral moves don't really have to happen within an organization. They can happen in another organization. So you can take a move to get out of an organization, or just if you want something different. So maybe you don't want to move up, but you want something different. You take a lateral move in another organization or in another industry. Took me a second to get that word there. You could take a lateral move into another industry, and all it's going to do is expand your perspective. And then that's going to make you more marketable down the road, right? Sometimes those broader experiences, they're going to show that you're adaptable. Now, there's a line there. If we move around too much, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but if we move around too much, it's going to look like you're job hopping. But if we expand our knowledge and if we show, hey, I took this for this reason, and now I understand this better, then that is a way that you're advocating for yourself and the skills and the experience that you have, right? New types of responsibility are going to increase your ability to be a leader. And I think that's something that for people who are on a leadership track, they have to understand that leadership is not always in a linear position. A lot of times, especially when you get into senior leadership, they want to see that you've had some broader experiences. They want to see that you understand different parts of the business, because so many senior leadership positions encompass more than one thing. So often a senior leader has multiple departments that report up to them, that they have to have some understanding of the organization as a whole. So anytime that you can expose yourself to that is going to just make you a stronger candidate for leadership. Somebody that's been on one path their entire career and not done anything else, it doesn't mean that they can't get into those leadership positions. There are especially some that I think value that. But for a lot of them, they want a little bit more breadth and they want somebody that's going to be able to work across different functions. And then some lateral moves just create leverage because they make it harder for you to fit into a box. They make it harder for you to stay in this one lane. And I think that for some people, that can be a leverage point. I think about the difference between being a specialist and a generalist. I think generalists get a lot of negativity around understanding a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, it's the generalist that you really want in the room because they understand different parts of the organization. One of the things that I did really well was I made some good decisions in one of the organizations that I was in. And then I was highly valued in a particular position because I had a very broad understanding of the organization. And so my view, my relationships I held from other departments are part of what got me one of the positions that I held. And so it just depends on the situation whether or not it's going to be valued, but never think that it's not going to be valued. Now, the flip side of that is there are situations where being a specialist is the way to go. It really just depends. It depends on you. It depends on the organization. It depends on the industry. Like there are a lot of things to take into consideration, but I also don't want people to overlook some of these lateral moves that can really help enhance who you are as a professional. Okay. So a couple of examples of what this can look like. I work a lot with recruiters. And so a recruiter might move into HR operations because it allows them to gain exposure to different parts of the business than they would in a recruiting position. Recruiting is very narrow. You do the same things all the time. You might have some specific departments that you work with. You might work across departments. But it's very specific position with very specific outcomes, whereas HR operations is going to bring you into a different world of skills. It's going to allow you to think differently. You're still in the same department. So you're still working in the same area, but you're doing something a little bit different. So that's kind of a smaller move that I would see people make that I think is really strong. A marketing professional goes into product strategy. I think this is such a good move, especially for marketing professionals that maybe are struggling right now. I know that's an area where a lot of people have been laid off, but going into product is a very natural move. There are a lot of transferable skills. There are a lot of similar systems that you can do, and there's a lot of creativity that's involved, and there's a lot of structure involved. So there are a lot of things that you can take from marketing and put into product that's going to be really helpful. And then what that does is if you end up going back onto the marketing side, you have such a better understanding of the business process and how we're getting to where we're getting with a product. So you can see how sometimes making a lateral move across into something else really can help diversify the experiences that you have, but you have to learn how to talk about them well. So I want you to think about opportunities you've had in the past, or maybe opportunities that are coming up, or things that you're interested in. Are there parts of the business that you would like to have some experience in? And are there opportunities within your current organization to be able to do that? And if you did, how would that become a part of your career story? How would you talk about that? And how would you explain that? So I started talking about transferable skills, right? So I think this is something that's so underlooked in some of these lateral moves, especially when you go into a different function. But we we talk so much about the specialized experience, and I think that it's great. But again, I will say a lot of times the person that leaders want in the room, they are more generalists. They are the ones that can apply their skills across different environments and different problems. So, yes, there is a place for specialized experience. I'm not knocking that at all. We absolutely need that. But I think that we need to honor the generalists a little bit more than we have because there's such a place for them and people want them. They just can't always articulate that specifically on a job description, which can make it hard for generalists to find their place. So why are transferable skills so important in this process and thinking about lateral moves? Well, transferable skills, they're going to expand your flexibility. You're absolutely going to be more flexible when you can make these transitions into other areas, whether it's functionally across organizations or even across industries. You now understand what it means to adapt, right? Communication, leadership, problem solving, relationship management, and even strategic thinking, they are going to show up across multiple types of positions. These are transferable skills that you're going to see regardless of the title that you hold. And so when people think, oh, there's no way I can make this change, there's no way that I can go do this other thing, you can. You have more skills than you think that you do. You just have to think about the position and the skills in a new way. And I think that's where a lot of people get stopped up. And there is a little bit of a challenge there. But once you get past that hurdle, then you understand that the positions really aren't that much different. And the base skills a lot of times are very similar, unless it's a specialized role, which is different. Okay. I think different experiences can strengthen us as people, as professionals. And even though everything looks unrelated on paper, and sometimes it's hard to explain on a resume or even on LinkedIn, when we can in person help tell somebody, hey, this is why I did this. This is what I got out of it. This is how it's been so helpful and how it's going to help me in this position. I think that's when people start to understand those connections. This is where cover letters can be really helpful for some people. And I know a lot of people hate cover letters, but cover letters help explain these types of career moves in a way that your resume can't. And I will also say there are managers that love it when somebody has diversified experience, and there are managers that hate it. So sometimes it's not up to you. Well, it's never up to you, right? The hiring manager is the one that's going to make the decision. So sometimes you're just applying for the wrong role at the wrong organization with the wrong person. And that's not your fault, right? Like there's only so much that you can do, but understanding that if you can explain the position as best you can and why you made that choice, then that's going to be really helpful. You have to be able to connect everything together. Sometimes that's hard to do on a resume, so the cover letter or your LinkedIn profile can help fill that gap. So some of my favorite examples of really good transferable skills from two different types of positions. Teacher transitions, I think, are one of the best to look at. So many teachers transition into something like corporate training because of the facilitation and communication skills that transfer, the ability to create programming as well. You were doing that as a teacher, you can do that in corporate training. I talked about a recruiter before, but a recruiter can move into sales. Recruiting is sales. I don't know if anybody knows that. It's a different type of sales, but it is sales. So a recruiter can move into sales because of the relationship building aspect, the ability to persuade others when needed, but also all of the tracking that's involved in both as well. Very, very similar skill sets. This is when I see a lot as well. An example I see play out very frequently. An operations professional becomes a project manager because ops and PM work is so similar. I see people switch between those roles a lot, and nobody really says anything because the skill sets are so similar. And I think that group of people understands, like, oh, yes, we're basically doing the same work. And so that's a really easy switch. And I think this is important to understand too when you're looking at applying for positions and the titling, because so many organizations don't title the right way. Some are really good at it, but some give weird titles, or they give one title for something and it's really something else. And so understanding the different titles that your skill set can work with is also really helpful. So a lot of my PM clients, we look at operations titles because they're so similar and it doesn't really matter. So one of the things that I want you to think about when it comes to transferable skills is, can you clearly explain how your past experiences connect to where you want to go next? So if you're somebody that's had some different moves that maybe you've had a hard time articulating, you want to try to do that. And that really becomes the career story that you are going to tell. So look at transferable skills first and then build on top of that. Okay, so when we are looking at all of this, when we are looking at these lateral moves, there is a point that you can get to where everything is disconnected and nobody knows where to place you. So that is a problem for some people. And I'm going to admit, like, it's hard to manage that type of career story. It's hard for the person. It's hard even for me as a career coach because you're trying to make sense of a path that is completely different. And I think what we're seeing when that happens is experimentation. We are seeing somebody that's experimenting with different career paths and they're trying to figure out who they are. And I think when you're in your 20s, that's fine. When you get into your 30s, that's when we have to start making some more intentional choices. However, that is not true for everyone. And I think that there are two audiences here when I'm talking about kind of this disconnect. There is the person that is trying to figure out where they fit. So they've taken a bunch of different positions and they're trying to figure it out, and maybe they've now landed on something, so they're trying to stay in that field. We also have people who I would call free spirits, and they don't want to be in the same thing. They want to switch around, they want to do different things. I think that's fine. And I think the problem with that is society says it's not fine. A lot of the times, the people that fall into this free spirit category probably have ADHD, if I had to guess. My clients that fall into this category, I have a couple of them, and they have ADHD. So that's not indicative of everything, but I've done enough research on ADHD to know that it's something that I see frequently with people who have ADHD, and it's because you get bored and you want to do something different. Not all ADHD is like that, so it depends on your flavor, but it's what I see a lot. They're free spirits. They want to go and do different things. The reality of a free spirit is they don't want to settle down. They want to do something different. And so they're going to take different opportunities as they come up, and they don't want to write a resume. They're probably not going to take positions that require resumes because they are really just finding people and situations that they like, that they want to try, and people gravitate toward them. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The challenge that those people have is society has a hard time with them. And so then they feel this disconnect of, well, I want to be a part of something, but I also want to have this freedom. And I think that's some of what that person has to figure out for themselves. So I'm not going to go too deep on that because it's so specific to the person. But if you are somebody that has switched around a lot because you get bored, because you want to try something new, that's okay. That's okay. We have to own that. And we also have to own that it's only going to take us so far. So you might not be a senior leader in a corporate organization, but you also probably would never want that anyway. So we have to think about that and just reset what success looks like and be confident and comfortable with ourselves when it comes to that. Okay. So I want to talk about the disconnection with some of these career moves and what can happen. So I've said this before, but the nonlinear career move, so this means like we're just making career moves that don't seem to connect to each other. It can still create leverage, okay? Because there are likely skills that you're bringing through each position that connect, and that's why you took that opportunity. And sometimes it's you just wanted to try it out. And I think that's fine too. Then that becomes part of the career story, and you just have to be comfortable talking about that. I think that while on paper it can look like a disconnection, the different experiences that you have will become an advantage when you can connect them all together. So this is why if you're somebody that has some of these disjointed experiences, you have to be able to talk about why, and you have to talk about whatever the thread is that is through them. You're the thread, right? Like you're the common denominator. So what is it about you that you brought to each of these positions? As I said before, some managers are going to appreciate the broad experiences. And I would argue smaller companies are going to appreciate it more than corporate companies. So if you're somebody that has moved around a lot and you are struggling to find positions, I would look at smaller organizations. I would look at local organizations versus going like big corporate. Because a lot of times those owners, they value the diversity. They value that you've had all these different experiences and you can bring it into their organization. Okay. The reality too is some people are going to struggle. Some people are linear thinkers. They have a hard time putting the pieces together. Other people are going to get it right away. They're going to see how everything connects and why it's important. And you just have to deal with that, and I think that's where being around the right type of people that understand who you are as a person. And in our last episode, we talked about sponsorship. So having people in your life who are sponsors for you, who are going to pull you into the random positions, that's what you want in your career, right? And those are going to be your external sponsors, not an internal sponsor. All right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more now about evaluating some of these lateral moves strategically, because I think that is actually the most important part of this. Obviously, we understand that there are barriers and there are things that are frustrating when it comes to our past and the choices that we've made. So how do we move forward well? I think that lateral moves are really interesting in mid and late career because they're usually fueled by something different than when you're in early career. I think early career, it's really about experience, but in your mid to late career, it's just about doing something different or getting out of a situation, and that is okay too. So some of the best lateral moves are the ones where you're expanding opportunity. So you're looking to the future and going, okay, I can see where my experience here is going to help me at this point. It might not be the next position, but it might be a position or two after that. So it's not necessarily what's happening immediately, but it's what's happening in the future. One thing I tell clients a lot who are in burnout or in toxic environments is your lateral moves are going to get you out of the current situation. So if somebody is in a really bad situation and I want them to get out, I'm going to encourage a lateral move. Just go to another organization, go into a different industry doing the same job, just get out, take that lateral move, give yourself some time to heal, and then let's have a different conversation. That is still a strategy. And that's a strategy that gives you time to actually heal and figure out who you are, not in this burnt out, stressed out scenario. So that is also something to think about in terms of why do you want to make this lateral move. So here are some questions that I think are helpful when we're talking about making a lateral move. Does this move expand my business understanding? So this would be a move within an organization in most cases, which could be helpful for future leadership opportunities. Does this move increase my relationships or exposure to certain people within the organization or even externally at another organization? Will this move strengthen my leadership potential for the future, whether I stay in this organization or go to another one? Will this move make me more adaptable? Is it going to show my breadth, or is it going to maybe keep me in a more narrow positioning, more narrow than I would like anyway? And does this align with the direction that I want my career to evolve toward? I think sometimes we only think about the next step because that's all we have the capacity to think about. But when we can start thinking about our careers a step or two beyond the next position, that allows us to evaluate a little bit different. Doesn't mean you have to actually take that position, down the road, but it allows us to go, oh, I can see where this skill set is going to be helpful. I can see where this move into a different industry is going to help strengthen my resume. It's going to help strengthen my career story. So those are the questions that you want to ask yourself. All right, we're talking about compounding this season. That's a word that I've been using a lot, compounding leverage. And I think what happens with lateral moves is those lateral moves compound our range and they compound what is possible. And they allow us to see things in such a different way that now we have strengthened our judgment, our adaptability, and our just general understanding of the work that we're doing or the organization that we're in over time. I've said this already, but those broader perspectives really are going to help you understand the business better and ultimately is going to improve decision making because you're thinking beyond what is right in front of you and you're thinking about the organization as a whole, or you're thinking about the client experience beyond the role that your department or your position plays. So that's always going to be helpful and it's always going to look positively for those who are in positions of making decisions about your career future in the organization. I think this cross-functional awareness and cross-functional experience, all that's going to do is build influence. So if you can get on a different team, if you can have different experiences around the organization, this is especially true of larger organizations. All that does is help position you well. But even in smaller organizations, there's so much opportunity to meet with people and understand what they're doing. And again, all that does is broaden your perspective and help reinforce that you understand the work a little bit differently. Those transferable skills Oh, I can't even explain how impactful transferable skills can be when you can articulate them clearly. I think that it allows you to see the business from a more complex place because you've had a different type of exposure. And I think all that's going to do is help you. So I think sometimes when we question a lateral move, we really have to look at the skill set. I think that is the core piece of this is what are the skills that I'm gaining? And sometimes the title is going to be an issue. I'm not going to lie. Um, but there are ways that we can work around that as well, and that's a very specific experience. Obviously, we're not gonna lie about our titles, but sometimes those titles aren't right anyway, and so we can use more general language and put your internal title, like, in parentheses or something like that on your resume and on LinkedIn. So, there are ways to work around that, but really focusing on skills, transferable skills, I think that is one of the things that really helps these lateral moves fuel this compounding of your range. And I know that that's a newer concept. We don't talk about compounding in careers as much as very like finance focused language, but it was something I introduced in this season because I think we have to look at different decisions that we make and what is going to have the biggest impact, what is going to compound the most. I talked about sponsorship in the last episode and how sponsorship is just going to skyrocket your career. I think lateral moves compound, but in a much more subtle way. I think that they build. I think it builds, and then you see eventually where that helps. I had a situation early in my career where my skill set from my first career path got me a position in my second career path because I was able to hold a dual position. After that position, I stopped talking about the other path because that's not what I was doing anymore and it's not what I wanted to be known for. But that original career path for me consistently pops up as something that is still a benefit to me. It has saved me tons of money over the years. And I think it's something that sets me apart as a business owner in my field because I'm just able to do things a little bit differently. So I'm still seeing the compounding of a career choice that I made early on that I ended up moving away from but still impacts me today. So we just never know what's going to happen with those career moves or how they're going to come back and help us in the future. Man, I see so many professionals end up making career decisions based on optics instead of leverage. And a lot of times that means that they make a career move for the better title or the path that makes sense for other people, even when the other opportunity is going to expand their perspective, their relationships, their business understanding, and even their future opportunities in such a bigger way. Those lateral career moves are so much harder to measure because the benefit is not always immediate or obvious. And so many of us are sensitive to what other people think that we end up making a decision that's just not as strategic, right? Careers are messy. And sometimes a move that looks random, especially to other people, ends up being one of the most useful experiences that you can have later because it expanded your understanding. It expanded your learning and your leadership and your communication and your adaptability in ways that you really couldn't even know at the time that you made the decision. I think sometimes people make career moves because of burnout or survival or curiosity or frustration. And sometimes those aren't great career moves. Sometimes they are. Sometimes we just need to get out. So we take a position that is not aligned with what we're doing, and that's okay. But then sometimes we have to then get reconnected to what the bigger picture is after we make that emotional decision. And hear me now, emotional decisions are okay. Emotional decisions sometimes save our lives, and that's what we have to do, right? But then we might have to do a little bit of work to get people to understand that decision without giving away too much. And that's going to be sometimes a challenge. And the other challenge is, honestly, I think the main challenge is just being intentional enough to understand that your experiences are helping you become a better professional over time. They're helping you become a more marketable professional over time. You just might not see it yet. So are you choosing some of these moves because they look impressive immediately and you want to, have that LinkedIn update be that you're moving ahead from somebody else, we're always trying to impress somebody? Or are you making the career move because it's helping you build flexibility and judgment and relationships and the transferable skills that are going to give you the best opportunities in the future? Next episode, we are going to talk about staying market ready. And why having options changes the way professionals navigate uncertainty. I think that's going to be an impactful one, especially with how the market is now. And honestly, the market's always changing. So I think this will be a really good episode for those who are trying to navigate a lot of uncertainty. I'll see you next time, and remember, you control your career.